So we thought we'd kind of gather some folks from our community and have a conversation about it, and give some advice, and let everyone, or some people that we know, kind of tell you all what they think and give their opinion. You're probably going to hear some things that people might disagree on or have different opinions, and that's kind of the point, is that a lot of this professionalism in this virtual environment is a little bit subjective. So, take the advice and kind of, you may have to make some of your own decisions about what works for you. But I want to get started. And if one housekeeping note, if you have questions, we're going to take about the last 15 minutes to answer your questions. So if you have them, you can type them in the chat box. We will try to get to as many as we can. So I want to start off with our first speaker, Michelle Kannan, who is a major gifts officer at Giffords. Michelle has a long career in fundraising, and has been an event planner, and I know that has dealt with a lot of different, has interviewed a ton of people and talked to a ton of people, sort of in a kind of networking environment. So I want to start off, Michelle, and just by asking you, from your perch as a fundraiser, as somebody who interviews a lot of people for a fundraising job, what does a successful virtual interaction look like? So what are some of your pet peeves as well?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me today. Really excited to be here virtually with you all. So I think a lot of the things that I'm noticing about the new virtual way we live in, first and foremost, I think some things haven't changed, right? The first step in job interviewing is often going to be virtual. It's applying through maybe a system on the website, or through LinkedIn, or through Idealist, whatever tool you use to find your job. That first step is very much a virtual thing. And so there's some things that you can do right off the bat, I think, to be noticeable and stick out. I still think number one for me is a good cover letter. We don't always see that in job application processes. It's always surprising to me how that still continues to be the case. But your resume is important, obviously, but the volume of applications I'm getting currently for jobs that I'm hiring for, that cover letter is the first thing I'm going to see. It's my first impression to you. And so that can be incredibly important. I think that the other piece that maybe has shifted a little bit more is, I know that PLEN really teaches you all to network and use your networks and make introductions. I find that now that we're moving virtually, like, you may not be able to go grab a coffee with someone who works at the organization you're trying to work for, but you can still have those virtual interactions. You can still reach out to folks in a professional way. And I find that people are still recommending people for the job. They're still letting me know, oh, so-and-so applied for a job at Giffords. If you see their application come through, I can vouch for them. So those kinds of things have stayed the same. I think the one thing, Sarah, you asked about pet peeves, is, again, like, I think this is not necessarily something that we're only seeing because we've gone more virtual, but know the job that you're going for, study, you have time, we have time now. I think that's the thing that I'm noticing. And so when I ask you why you want to work for my organization, I want a really well thought out answer. And that answer might actually be even more important these days than skills and that kind of thing, because the job pool just got very large as a result of what's happening with COVID-19 and unemployment. And you're competing now with people who are finding themselves unemployed, unfortunately, and who have great skill. But the person that's going to stand apart for me is the person who can tell me why they want to work for an organization like ours, which is a very specific organization. For those that don't know, we do gun violence prevention. And so that's a pretty specific topic, and you can learn a lot by just looking at our website. And I'm amazed by how few people take the time to learn that we're led by a principal who is someone who served in Congress and almost lost their life to gun violence and doesn't mention it at all in an interview. So take this time to do some research.
That's great. Can you maybe talk about a really successful virtual interaction you've had with someone recently, and maybe another one that wasn't so great? I mean, you kind of just mentioned that, somebody not knowing about Giffords, but maybe there's, some sort of interaction.
Yeah. Now that we are really taking out some of the personal piece of it, it's important to, if you're not on video, and obviously video is a different thing, we can see you, but even on the phone, I think, and this is sort of an example of not a good thing to do. When you're on the phone with someone, there is a way to sort of sound engaged, and I can imagine what you look like on the phone, because again, sitting here doing these over and over again, you kind of get the cadence of when someone's really engaged and when someone's not with your questions. And so I've had examples. I had one recently where the person just, every time I asked a question, seemed very much like they hadn't been paying attention to the question being answered, and I could tell in the way that they answered it. And that sounds so simple, but it's easy to get distracted now, right? We're at home, the dog might be barking, you see someone walk by outside, maybe you have roommates and they're doing something and it distracts you. And so it can be a lot of stimulation, and we get that, we all get that, we're all experiencing that. But we're still expecting you to put your sort of best foot forward. I think one of the best interview interactions I've had recently was just sort of on that same vein, like someone who really, I could tell, had found, a quiet space. And she mentioned that, right? She mentioned that I live with roommates, and so, I'm sort of closer to my room, but if you hear anything, I apologize, and sort of acknowledging that this is a weird time for all of us. This is not probably where she would normally take an interview. It was refreshing. It was nice to hear, and there were no problems, but I was at least sort of prepared for, maybe a sound here or a sound there. And I thought that was really helpful. Then, of course, the obvious things like having the right things to say about the organization and why she wanted to work there and what skills she brought.
I think that's so important. I love what you said about kind of just preparing people for it. As somebody, I have a dog who often barks on the calls. And so just sort of preparing people for that and making sure that I've kind of, I know what to do when that happens. I think those sorts of things are really important. Is there anything else that kind of, what if something unexpected happens? Like what if the doorbell rings, or what do you think people should do if something like that happens on a virtual networking conversation or an interview or anything like that?
Sure. And that's going, that's going to happen. I had a staff meeting this morning where my internet just kept going in and out. And there's a backup. I had a meeting recently where I just could not get my sound to work. And so I was able to semi-quickly, probably could have done it a little quicker, hopped on the phone version, right? So there is always an opportunity for a backup. Especially if it's a Zoom call, if it's a video call or a Google call where there's a call-in number and a video number. So having that backup kind of ready to go is number one. I think number two, I would say what I sort of said before is having that prep conversation, right? So I have a dog, there's construction outside my house. My internet has been a little bit shoddy today, and I'm apologizing in advance if that goes out. Those kinds of things can at least prepare someone. And I will add, this is not necessarily something for that sort of set, but I did have a run-in that I forgot to mention that I thought was interesting. As we're all kind of working from home, a lot of people have gone home, maybe to their parents' house or to be with family or just somewhere that's not their regular office. In my case, I had a situation where somebody was on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, and I put Eastern Standard Time as in all of the time offerings, and they just did not register that. So be mindful, confirm those kinds of things, because people may be working from different spaces than they usually work at. Even if the job is based in DC, they may be working out of Chicago. And so you want to make sure you have the right time. That's like that is a new thing that I think is popping up. And so that's also important, like confirming all the details in extra, because people are kind of in a weird space right now, including your interviewer. They might be in the wrong headspace that day and have not put in what time it is in terms of Eastern Standard or specific time. So you want to make sure you are doing your due diligence to confirm all those things. But for the distractions, they're going to happen. That's the reality of it. And I think as long as you are able to predict as many as you can and apologize for the ones that you can't, if someone pops in the room or a dog starts barking or the construction starts up again, headphones are obviously a great way to cut out at least some of that noise. But we're just all trying to do the best we can, I think.
Sorry. Yeah, it is very hard. I think you're right, we're all trying to cope. So kind of to shift a little bit, so I want to talk specifically about, you work on the issue of gun violence, which until about a month ago, a lot of people were, it was a huge hot topic and so many people were talking about it. And I feel like that, in addition to a lot of other topics, has sort of fallen to the side a little bit, because all everyone's talking about is COVID-19. So
Right.
If somebody is really interested in gun violence, for instance, what is kind of a good way what should people be thinking about now? So when, hiring it seems to have slowed a little bit, when it picks up again, or sort of in the meantime, as you're waiting for calls back from an organization that's working on an issue you care about, what can people be doing?
So I think one, these issues, as we all know, are not going away just because COVID-19 is taking up all this space, right? And so if there's an issue you're passionate about, find out how they are dealing with it in this space. I think a lot of groups are working on how they can be more collaborative. I know that Giffords is starting to have some initial conversations with abortion rights groups, because there's a cross-section around why President Trump has decided that gun shops are essential and abortion clinics are not. So we're trying to figure out how we can co-message something that doesn't necessarily get into debates over which is true, but just sort of puts out that information. And so from an organizational standpoint, we're all going to be trying to be creative on how we can sort of stay relevant. So as someone who is looking to go into a line of work, gun violence, for example, is a very nuanced issue with a lot of layers beyond, mass shootings. So this is a great time for you to spend researching what other types of things fall under gun violence, like domestic violence, suicide, those kinds of things, and really getting a grasp on that, so that when groups start hiring en masse again, you've kind of spent this time researching what happened when we were all sort of on lockdown. But I think it's important to note that not everybody is slowing down. There are still some organizations that are hiring, so keep a lookout for those, because this work doesn't stop, because those organizations are still very, very busy, and we cannot afford to just sort of sit back and wait for this thing to pass, because they are intertwined, right? If the hospitals are overcrowded, we can't be sending people to hospitals with gunshots because the ERs are swamped right now, or because of a domestic violence incident. We don't want those folks to have to go to the hospital when the hospital is not able to handle that capacity. And so there's an opportunity, I think, with this time that we have to learn a little bit more about the layers of these issues beyond the surface. It's a great time to come out and be, not an expert, but know a little bit more than you probably did when you might have applied today.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Michelle.
Sure.
And we're going to come back to you probably in a little bit for questions. But I want to move on to our next, our round two, with Jona van Deun, who is the executive director of the president of the Nebraska Tech Collaborative. Jona used to be on the board of PLEN and has been and is a PLEN alumna. So she knows this world very well. She has, as you've seen from her bio, she has so much experience in government, also in the private sector. So welcome, Jona. I'm so glad you're able to join us today.
Thanks, Sarah. You guys, thanks for having me, guys. This is great. It's nice to see all of our friends from around the country, you know, gathering together, and that you were still able to have everybody get together. This is fantastic.
Yeah, great. So from your sort of perch as a, you know, somebody who's working in with tech, and I know you do a lot of hiring, talk about what a successful virtual interaction means from your position and in your experience.
So a successful virtual interaction. So our successful virtual interactions are probably a little bit more basic, just because we've got a lot of younger folks coming into our company. So I represent the Nebraska Tech Collaborative, which is a workforce initiative based out of a larger foundation here in the state. I returned from DC, or I left DC about 16 months ago because of my husband's job, and was tired of commuting back and forth to Washington, DC. And so took this position with 120 some tech companies from across the state, a lot of enterprise companies, a lot of small startups. So we were all talking about that. I was explaining that I was going to be doing this. And so we were talking about some of the really funny things that we've seen. So I'm sure you've all seen the article about the woman who did her entire meeting look like a potato because of her filters. So check your filters, check your background. The horrible story that I have this week is, you know, my kids had to take pictures of themselves doing their work and not realizing after you take the picture that there's like wine bottles down below. So be aware of what your surroundings are. But as I keep saying to everybody right now, this is the best opportunity, especially if you're terrified of interviewing. This is like an open book test, truly. Michelle talked briefly about doing your research, making sure that you're prepared. There is no excuse anymore because, again, this is the open book test to interview, to network. And so our interactions is just kind of check your surroundings, make sure that you're prepared. That's more than anything. And try to be your authentic self. I know we were joking before this, we were talking about how tough it was to put on makeup, and probably this is the most of us have had on in weeks. But I always try to be dressed from the waist up. So I'm no longer dressed head to toe, but from the waist up, I look remotely put together. I still haven't quite figured out the lighting piece, but I have staffers they worry about the lighting. So again, it's the preparation. Like there's just no excuse not to be prepared for any of these interactions.
Great. And in the interest of, my dog is barking right now, so if you hear her in the background, that's what's happening. So can you talk about a really successful interaction you've had recently, and maybe one that hasn't been so successful?
So when this whole thing hit, the Nebraska Tech Collaborative had just started. We were preparing for a board meeting of 25 people and an in-person meeting. So we, in a matter of weeks or hours, had to convert our entire meeting and all of our documents for a virtual meeting, which I was in sheer panic about. So we weren't supposed to be going to the office. I was sneaking to the office trying to get all of this stuff prepared. And so we got it all set up. We got all the documents out to everybody early. We had the agenda finished, and we get everything thrown up on the screen. So I was going to show slides, and I couldn't figure out how to go back and forth between the slides and myself for talking. So we just left the slides up there. And at the time, somebody that worked for me had got them up, but she didn't realize that we could still see her, even though we saw the slides up on the screen. So we could still see her. So every time something would work, she would cheer, or she would move around, or if somebody made a comment, she would something. And finally, I'm like, you have to stop moving around because I can see every single thing that you're doing. So the best laid plans, our intention was to have a flawless meeting, and not many people saw it, but the people that did recognized that she didn't realize that we could all see her. cheering, moving around, doing all of these different things during a board meeting. So that's kind of a questionable one. Some of the best interactions, I do probably about, I've started doing 3 to 5 informational interviews for folks a week. And I did one on Tuesday that was phenomenal. Prepared, she'd done her research on me, which was frightening. She had done research about the community at which I had just taken over. She'd read a lot of the press clips around my taking over this group. And she asked some really wonderful, thoughtful questions. And I only allow for 30 minutes for these informational interviews, just because when a lot of people are kind of stagnant, we're still moving fast and furious. And so this was one of the best interactions I've had there. She was prepared, she was engaged. And so the whole interaction was wonderful. But then she had that thank you note out in a matter of 4 hours, recapping our entire conversation, recapping what, she had talked about me, where her interests lied, and recap, like I had offered to connect her with a couple of folks who were still hiring, and recapped that. So it was absolutely wonder, and she made it really easy. So
that's great. So do you have, I know we talked a little bit about kind of how to deal with unexpected things that happen. Any advice you have for people on that, kind of what they can do in case something unexpected happens?
When the unexpected happens, so you mean unexpected in getting a job or being hired, or
like just sort of in your kind of, if you're online with somebody.
Well, again, I think again, telling everybody, I've got 2 teenagers out in the other room doing school. So I was like, my kids are out there, 2 dogs. My kids definitely know, like, you don't come in here unless you're bleeding or on the verge of death.
Right.
That's when you walk in here. But no, I think, again, you just apologize for it and keep moving forward. I've had, I think Michelle was talking about the sound going out. So I'm pretty quick to get on the chat. So somebody kept saying, I can see you. So I'd get on the chat and answer all the questions. Testing things out. But yeah, for the most part, I think people now are expecting some of these types of things. So it's not the end of the world, but again, acknowledging that they're there, I think, is really important.
Yeah. So to shift gears a little bit, I know, I've known you for a while, and you're always so wonderful at doing, mentoring young women and kind of providing that, and sort of, giving them a really, building up their confidence and making them feel good, and empowering them to ask for what they want. What I know, I've heard from a lot of people that are frustrated that they're not getting called back for interviews, maybe even more so now. Even if that's temporary. What do you tell people, when you do these informational interviews? What do you tell people who are getting frustrated, who are, frustrated if they're just graduated and looking for a job and no one's calling them back? What advice do you have?
Right now, there's a couple things in that. So the days of sending 100 resumes to people and just hoping the spaghetti sticks it doesn't work. And I know we're supposed to be tech savvy. You can send in a ton of resumes, but I ask this to a lot of the students I mentor. They're like, well, I sent out 100 resumes, but I'm like, who did you talk to? And so I think what is happening to us now has really exacerbated that system where I'm going to fill out 100 resumes and hope that somebody calls back. More now than ever, this is the perfect time to reach out to those contacts. So if there are students on here who are returning PLEN students, you all need to open up those lists that Sarah has given to you and start touching base with folks. I love it when I hear from students that send a quick email like, hey, I'm about to graduate, especially in these past 3 weeks, that want to touch base and are looking for a little bit of reassurance that they're doing the right things. It's time to step up and do that. And then also too, we have to be a bit patient because a lot of companies have never done this before. And the ones that haven't, what I keep advising to a lot of the folks that I deal with is, look, you can't stop hiring. We need to figure out how to make this happen. because when we get to the other side of this, you do not want to waste your time ramping up to get back to where you were. And so some companies are better than others. I think we're very fortunate in tech because we've been doing a lot of this virtual hiring, a lot of these remote interviews, a lot of remote onboarding. And so one of the things that we're trying to do here is really help the small and mid-sized companies who don't have a lot of experience with that and helping them get through. So there's a patience factor. Also, it's not a bad idea if you have made that connection with that person. So you've gone through the process, you're about to get this, and I hear this a lot, but you haven't heard anything. And it's not that they're trying to keep something from you, but I think a lot of folks are trying to figure out what they're going to do. It is a perfect opportunity to restate in a good letter or email saying, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I'm really still interested. I know this is a difficult time that we're going through, but I really, I hope that you're doing well, but I really want to let you know that you're interested. What's the process going forward? Nobody can fault you for asking what the process going forward is. And I think people, you should be able to know. And anybody that's not calling back, especially if you've established that relationship, there's something else going on there. And they maybe just don't know how to handle, bad news. And that's what a lot of this is, of companies who are like, we're hiring like crazy and we're going to get all these people. We're going to hire you now. PLEN's sole focus is creating leadership roles or helping women find leadership roles in public policy and politics, especially in Washington, D.C. And the federal government is open for business. They are still hiring. It's slow. But if you're, and I think this is the STEM group, but if you're going to NIH, HHS, Government Accounting Office, the FBI, all these other agencies, everybody that I've talked to, they're still hiring. What they're trying to figure out is not only how to get people hired, but then what's that onboarding? So what kind of technology do I need to get to you if we give this person the job? How do they have a clearance? There are certain nuances of all of these jobs that need to be worked out. So I guess my ultimate message is for folks to hang tight, but also start tapping into those connections. I try to reach out to a couple of people that I haven't talked to in a number of years lately, just to check in on them. But also I checked in with somebody at FDA, and miraculously she sent an email back like, do you know anybody looking for a job doing communications, public affairs? We need to hire this person immediately. So of course I felt good that I was able to send over a couple names, but again, this is going to be a relationship game, and this is not the time to be afraid of that. This is the time to embrace that. If you're on this call right now and you're trying to figure out how you're going to navigate this, I hope Sarah would pass along my contact information. I'm happy to help you talk through what you're trying to do. But again, this is a time for focus on what you want to do. And if you don't know what you want to do, this is the time to focus on what you don't want to do. But again, federal government is open. A lot of those jobs are pretty solid. I mean, you're getting experience, you're getting, it's steady pay, and there's also a route for advancement. So this is an opportunity to look at other issue areas that you may not have thought of before. So I'm sorry, I ramble on, but I just feel it's so important for people, again, stand up for what you want, ask for what you want, but really, you need to be networking with people and setting up those conversations with people and touching base with them.
Great. Thanks, Jona. That's really helpful. Really, really good advice. So I want to move on to our last two speakers. We've got Jamie Jensen and Kimmi Cantrell, who are both at a great company called Careers in Nonprofits. Jamie Jensen is a senior recruiter for their temporary division, and who works with a lot of entry-level folks, and folks looking to kind of find something in between permanent gigs. And Kimmi is the managing director of Careers in Nonprofits, and she also has been working for a long time with their temporary division. We've used Careers in Nonprofits to help us find some temporary employees when we've been in between, and it's a great way to kind of test out the waters in something as an employee, something you might want to do. And I'll let them tell you a little more. But welcome, Kimmi and Jamie. So glad you're able to join us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So first, I want to start out and ask you all. I mean, what's a good virtual interaction look like when you're, especially as you are, I mean, you guys are talking with a lot of people who are looking for jobs and employers themselves.
For sure. So I think Jamie and I are going to ping pong a little bit. So I'll go first. I'm Kimmi. Thank you again for having us. I think pretty much what has already been stated is going to continue to be true in our scenario as well. A good interaction, I think, is one that can be professional yet transparent. Jamie said this to me right before we got on this call, but we're all people here, and we're all in this together. It's not like I'm the only person that's quarantined in my house with a cat. It's not like I'm the only one that is having technical difficulties. And so I think, the more that we can just be transparent in that professionalism is what's going to be the most important. So as you mentioned, Sarah, you just said that, you're like, my dog may bark, and if it does, please just disregard. And so I think, again, both of the other panelists already said this, but if you can get in front of that, I think it just makes for a much more fluid conversation. Because I really do think at the end of the day, if you have the skills that you need and you're prepared in the right way, just because your cat happens to crawl into the screen shouldn't be a reason why you don't get a job. And if it is, I personally believe that that wasn't the job for you then, because that's just how it is right now. So that's what I would say, kind of really piggybacking off of everybody. What I think is a good virtual interaction is one that is as professional as you can be, yet as transparent as possible too.
Yeah,
Great.
I would agree with. Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree with that too. I think one way to really stand out though for me during this time is to really have energy when you come into that meeting. I think because we're at home and like we're not really seeing people, so many people are coming in kind of like, yeah, it's cool, like very monotone. And the people who are really wowing me are the ones who are like, yes, what is it? This is what I'm really passionate about. I love this, and this is what I've done before that I don't really like. The ones who are really showing up are the ones who are definitely wowing me at this time.
Great. Is there anything, I mean, maybe, and I know we've talked a little bit about kind of good, bad interactions. Have you heard anything from employers where they're like, oh my God, I had somebody do this, or like, this person was really wonderful and here's why?
I think Jamie may be better to answer this one. So I'll let her take the lead here.
Yeah, I mean, I think more often than not, we hear the feedback that's not so good, of course. And one particular instance that I had was, a candidate showed up to their interview that, I had prepped them for. They were super excited. And then 10 minutes in, they were like, this just isn't going to work. And they hung up. Which was very shocking to everyone involved. But what it turned out was that the person was expecting something from the interview, and then it was different. They were expecting this interviewer to show up and be like, tell me more about yourself, and what did you, tell me what you want to do and whatever. But because I had already done that screening, they jumped right in of like, tell me about a difficult situation you've had to handle at work. And that just like threw this person off so much, and they felt maybe infringed upon or something. And so I think in this time, there's a lot of stress going on, and the more you can come into an interview, you're in your own space, like that should help calm those nerves. That then allows you to be an even more active listener and an even more, engaged and human, like we're saying, I mean, we're all in this together. And I think I laugh almost regularly with people because my pets love to, knock books off bookshelves. Right when we started this call, my dog suddenly decided he wasn't happy in the living room anymore. So, we're all doing the best that we can. And I think that's really what matters the most, but just rolling with the punches, I think, is really number one.
And to add to that too, I don't know that I would say that this is a bad virtual experience, but one thing that's tangible that is advice people could take with them is keeping your device sedentary. So I know that I've been on a few interviews with candidates who are doing the Zoom interview on their phone, which is perfectly fine because it's not fair to assume everybody has a nice desktop or laptop. But when it's, like this the whole time, it's hard to stay focused on the conversation because it
That's a
keeps
really good point.
moving. Yeah. And so I think, some tangible advice, it's okay if you don't have the perfect setup. It's okay if you don't have a 3-screen monitor with, the best high-tech webcam and the perfect lighting, but at least find a place where you can position it to sit sedentary. So that way, not only does your arm not get tired, but also it doesn't make for such a, nauseating experience in terms of how much you're moving.
Yeah, yeah. I would like to stick on that a little bit. Are there things, I mean, we've touched on some of these, but are there other things that you should, like, absolute no-nos, like don't, I mean, Jona talked about kind of being dressed for the part. I was on a call a few weeks ago and somebody was in a t-shirt and it was a professional, and there are sometimes, like, I will admit that some of our staff meetings with a small staff were like, pretty casual, but are there, like, I know I feel that if somebody's interviewing with me, they should probably be, dressed in a interview worthy top, I mean, is there
Right.
other advice like that you can give people as they're interviewing?
Yeah, and I think again, some of these were already stated, and it's different too when it's an interview versus a staff meeting. Because I know my team and our staff meetings, our biggest question is, "What'd you eat for lunch today?" We're just trying to still have
Yeah.
fun and laugh and be collegial. But I think when it comes to an interview, things like having checking your background, which was already mentioned, I think that's really important because maybe you can't have a perfectly clear wall, but what does your poster on the wall say? You don't necessarily want to give too much in that regard.
Mhm.
I think the wine bottles were mentioned. It's great to not have those things in your interview because you
Right.
otherwise wouldn't have those topics come up in an interview. And so I think that's really what's important is, if you have a poster on your wall of who you're planning to vote for in 2020, I just don't know that that is the best icebreaker because you just don't know. That's just not the right time or place. Not to say you
Mhm.
shouldn't, not to say that you have to keep that information to yourself, but as the first impression, you just want to make sure that things are different. I would also say in terms of wardrobe, yes, the best you can get professionally from the waist above. I think it does help to do the full body, but it just makes
Mhm.
you feel good if nothing else. But probably don't show up with wet hair or things that you wouldn't do at an interview no matter what. You want it to seem as though, even though you probably did just move from one side of the couch to the other, you want it to seem as though you did prepare for that interview or that conversation and it wasn't just haphazard. So that's, I guess some other things I would add to that.
Yeah. Anything else, Jamie?
I mean, I think from a technology standpoint too, it doesn't hurt to try and do a test run with a friend if you've never used Skype
Mm,
before, Zoom, or just to make sure that you know how to do it, first of all, and of course that your sound and video is working properly. It goes a long way. I'm going to be forgiving at this moment if, like,
right.
oh man, my webcam is not working today. Well, not ideal, but okay. And again, when you can make it work 100%, that just puts you a step above everybody
Right.
else.
Right. Yeah, no, that's so true. I also find that, using humor, if you can make a joke about it, if like your
Exactly.
dog, like anything, I think that sort of putting the other person at ease too, because as somebody said before, we're all human and this is a rough time. Like it's
Yes. Yeah.
it's not
Yeah, for
easy to
sure.
be here. So lastly, this is a crazy, crazy time. What can students or recent graduates or people who have maybe recently gotten laid off, what can they be doing right now to kind of, either from, interacting with CNP or kind of just in general, what are some of the things that people should be doing right now to put their best foot forward?
Great question. And I think that there's honestly a lot that you can be doing right now. And it may not look what you thought it would look like, but simple things such as like self-care are the best things to do right now. There's so much we can't control, and yet there is so much that we can. You know, you can control what you use your time, you know, you can control how you fill your time. You can control if you're deciding to get swept up in social media and news articles versus kind of taking a virtual break and going for you know, a walk in nature, secluded 6 feet distance. You know, you can, there are certain things that you do have control over, and I think that's really what we should be focused on, is the tangible things that we can do every single day. You know, I've had to do for myself, I'm not looking at June right now, I'm looking at today, you know, and maybe tomorrow, but mostly today. And what can I do today to make this a better experience for me? Because like our previous panelist said, you know, what you don't want to do is wait until this is over, and then that's when you start ramping things up. Like, use this time. Who do you want to be when you emerge out of this experience? Because it is temporary. We will not be like this forever. And so once it's over, who do you want to be? Do you want to be somebody who spent, you know, the whole time just feeling overwhelmed and letting that control every step? Maybe, but do you want to be somebody who, yes, felt overwhelmed, but decided that they were going to journal those feelings and then go update their LinkedIn profile and then send their resume to Jamie Jensen because she can help them? You know, like, how do you want to take advantage of this time that we're given? I think that's really what we need to focus on. And resilience is a thing I always, you know, preach and hope to practice. And I just think that right now is a really great time to remind ourselves that as a species, we can handle a lot more than we give ourselves credit for, and that it won't be like this forever. So that is my my tips of what we should do right now. I'm sure Jamie has some good ones too.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a practical standpoint, it always begins with the self, right? But if you are, you know, ready, and I know there's a lot of anxiety that goes around graduating and not knowing what the market's going to look like, I think one of the proactive things that you can do, look into staffing firms, honestly, in your area. They are often the first to ramp back up in hiring when things like this happen. And we're still hiring right now. You know, it's our job to find the companies that are still hiring and to keep connecting them with people. So if you're someone who really does want to keep working, find a staffing firm in your area. We're here in DC, Chicago, and San Francisco. And, you know, that's one way to just get yourself out there. And two, when I talk to people, if I am like, oh, you're interested in this, I actually know somebody here, you know, like, I'll connect you. And like, it's just you know, as other people were saying, it's a great time to be networking and just putting yourself out there. And to be honest, there are a lot of people right now who are sitting on their unemployment checks and they're like, I'm just not going to work for now. I don't need to. I'm just going to like wait until this all is over. And like, you know, I have kids at home, so like, it's just better for me to stay at home. So you're able to get in front of those people who are just kind of taking a back seat right now. So I would definitely still encourage people to continue searching. It might not be, you know, as fast as you want it to be. It might not be a seamless process, and in that I would just recommend you be patient. But if you are someone who's really determined to get out there and get working, now is a great time just to keep persistent with the outreach.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I want to thank you so much, you guys. That was great. I want to open it up to questions. Anyone have questions in the can type them into the chat box here. I'll give people a minute. Come on, y'all. You've got to have some questions. Oh, here we go. All right. Thanks, Maggie. How can I demonstrate that I am engaged during phone interviews when the other person can't see my body language that they would during an in-person or video interview? I found myself mm-hmming a lot, which throws off the other person. That's a great one. Anyone want to take this?
I mean, I'll start, and then I'm sure others will have things to add. So I think one of the ways that I've seen someone show interest is kind of towards the end when there are questions to be asked, right? What questions do you have for the interviewer? That's a great way to show that A, you've been listening, and B, you're engaged and you want this job. If the interviewer has set up an opportunity to say, like, please feel free to ask questions along the way, like, do that, ask questions along the way. That's a great way to show that you're engaged. I would love to see what other people say, but it is interesting that do actually throw me
So
off too. So.
I definitely agree. And what's funny is I consider myself to be relatively monotone. And so I really have a hard time on the phone anyway, because I think when you're talking to me, I'm expressive. You can feel my energy. I've got my hands going and I'm smiling. And on the phone, I find that I can just sound, I mean, even if you all just closed your eyes and didn't look at me right now, I just feel like I sound pretty monotone. So what I try to do is before any phone conversation, and this goes even without this pandemic, you know, this is anytime I've been talking on the phone my whole life. I try to give myself that boost of energy that I know the person on the other end would receive if they were with me. And so if that means that I'm standing while I do it, I do most of my phone calls while I'm standing or walking, because if I'm just sitting still, I'm just a lot more relaxed and not as paying as much attention. So that's one tip that I use, is I either stand when I have my phone calls, or I'm legitimately going for a walk or walking, because it forces me to put more energy and inflection into my own voice.
It's a great one. It's great advice. Anyone else want to add to that? Another question we have, how do I beat the applicant tracking system? Jona's laughing. You want to take that one? Oh, you're on mute.
Not really, because I laugh because, again, I love playing these games with, I mean, I've had a long career in politics and corporate America. I mean, my kids, I've had 24 jobs in a career of 30 years, which is a lot. And so I always laugh because it's about, I think a lot of it's about relationships, but I don't know if you really want to beat the algorithm, because they're looking for something. And all you're looking for is just to get your foot in the door, to show them who you are. And I think once you're able to do that, then it's pretty good sailing. But yeah, some of these algorithms, I'm trying to get a lot of my folks to stop using them, because I think some of them I don't think allows for the diversity that they're trying to get in their organization. So that's the reason I was laughing about it, because we have these conversations all the time here about why people, like, what's the reason for using these, and what happened to, like, getting to know people and understanding where they come from and where they want to be. That's all.
Something that I have heard people say before, which I think is an option, is to take that job description and find, like, the keywords that they have in there, and then either incorporate that into, like, the actual bullets of your resume, or a little cheat that I've heard, which, again, I don't know if I recommend this, but in your header, you can put those things in your header and then turn your text white, so it's not visible, but it'll get you past to a human eye, which is an option.
Great. What are some of your favorite questions to be asked during an interview? Are there any that have wowed you?
I have a great one that I think I shared with a couple of friends yesterday, but that came up in an interview I had recently with someone for a position that we have open. And I think this is a question you guys should be asking of employers going forward, is how did your company handle this COVID-19 situation? We are finding a lot out about employers today, and how they treat their employees and what they're doing for employees' mental, physical health, not just making sure that we have jobs, but are they really caring about the whole person? And so it from an interviewer standpoint, it's a real boost to be able to share when something is going well. And for your perspective as a prospective interviewee, this is a great opportunity to find out, like, is this a place I even want to work if something terrible happens? How did they treat their employees is going to matter.
That's a great question. And I would say too, you can ask any questions you want. A lot that happen are like, what are you looking for in this person? But I think whenever you ask a question about the person you're interviewing with, they always remember that so much more. Like, what do you love about what you do? What's your why? Why do you love this mission? So I think anytime that you ask a person, about themselves, because they've just spent the whole hour or however long asking about you, and so once you switch it to them, it just it allows you to leave a bigger impact oftentimes, because people remember, oh, that was the person that asked about me and asked about my day and cared about what I was, what my work looks like. And we're as a species, we like to talk about ourselves, and so I think it just it doesn't hurt to ask a more personal question about the person that you're interviewing with. I find this helpful.
You're muted.
Sorry. So how do you keep those of you who mentor people? How do you keep them engaged in sort of formal mentor programs? Someone's asking as a mentor, she's finding that her students are asking the same questions again and again. How do you keep mentees engaged?
This is Jona. I keep answering those same questions over and over again. And again, I think as somebody mentioned before, there's a lot of anxiety right now around all of this. And I think people are looking for reassurance or some type of roadmap. And so a lot of the students and young professionals that I do mentor, I try to check in with everybody, at least over the last 3 weeks. I think I've managed to check in with everybody, which is it's a lot of folks, trying to make sure that people getting what they need. So I had one person who was kind of like, I'm furloughed, what type of professional development should I be working on right now? So I have some friends who actually work in that space and connected everybody together, and got those people who are interested in doing that on those tracks. If people don't want to do anything, then I just check in to make sure that we're still just moving around. And then those ones who are looking for jobs, I'm doing my best to try to connect people that I know that have open jobs with the attributes that these folks have, and would do good work. So there's a lot. I mean, it's just, for me, it's just trying to make sure everybody's okay. I may not be able to solve that issue, but I think the checking in has really helped with a lot of my folks anyway.
Yeah, great. I want to get to a few more here. So this person's asking how often, she's a recent college grad, just having completed her first job out of college and continuing to interview for new positions. How often should I pull from my recent job and balance with that with referencing my professional experiences while I was at college? So this is actually something that we get, a question we get a lot, kind of in general. Anyone, kind of the balance of professional experience versus college professional experience?
Well, I would say, if you've had only one job out of college, like, no one's expecting you to pull all your experience from that one job. And if they are, that goes back to like maybe not the employer for you. Remember that you're interviewing your employers, right? This is also important. You want to make sure this is a place you want to work. And so if your experience includes, because you just haven't had the years of life to add that kind of experience, it's okay to go back to college. I think, if I, having fundraised for over a decade, went back and was talking about how I used to sell credit cards at Victoria's Secret when I was 15, they might be like, what does that have to do with anything? I'm in a different place. No one's expecting you to be in that same space. So call on the experience that fits the job. And if that happens to have been, in college, talk about it.
Great. I'm going to run through some of these a little more quickly. We've got a few minutes left. This is, people who have had their internship offers rescinded lately. and now finding themselves looking for another one. And a lot of these experiences are virtual. So what kind of student kind of thrives well in a virtual internship, and what can college students do to kind of show that they will thrive in a virtual internship?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to say that my number one thing would be adaptability. How can you take anything that comes your way and turn it into gold? Because a lot of people everybody's been impacted by this. Recent college grads, people who've been at their companies for years are being let go. I mean, this is, as everybody likes to say, unprecedented times. And so I think the best thing that you can do for yourself, and then for any future employer that you have, literally, I think this will be an interview question for decades beyond this, what did you do? How did you respond to this? And I think if you're able to show how adaptable you were, that no matter what came your way, you were able to overcome it and turn it into something good and make something out of it. I think that's really what people are going to be looking for. And that's really what's going to make you and your life rich. That's what's going to make you have meaningful experience and deep experiences, not by saying, woe is me, but what can I do with this? What is this trying to teach me? How can I turn this into something for good?
Mm-hmm. Great. And we have time for one more. This is about kind of, to your point, Kimmi, about how people are kind of filling the time. Are there any, maybe we can kind of have everyone give this a short answer. What are some skills that people might want to develop right now, that can make you stand out from a job? So maybe it's Excel, online leadership classes, things like that. Anyone have a sort of something that comes to mind?
If you can code, this is a great opportunity. I mean, I'm going to put my tech background, push people on, but if you can talk about what you care about, especially in science and math and business and entrepreneurship, and kind of make yourself stand out, especially with a lot of, I have probably about 10 Fortune 500 companies in my group, and then the rest are mid and small companies. But if you can code, if you know some type of computer language and how you're able to take that and match it up with where your interest lies, for me right now, and a lot of other people around the country that I've talked to, even in government. I mean, what this also has shown us is that we've all been forced now to do more things in tech. And that's what makes this so interesting, where if you went kind of kicking and screaming, or you're like, oh, I'll figure it out later, we are now in it. So this is a lot of these classes are free. Online, you can teach yourself how to do these things. I got a friend learning the ukulele, which probably isn't, helpful on a resume, but that's how she spends the time. I have somebody else teaching themselves French. But again, just try, you have to be intentional. Even if you aren't doing something, and even if you are working like crazy, you need to be more intentional about how you spend your time, and find things that you think are going to help you in the future. So I'm going to do one other quick plug. So on professional development, Angie Morgan and Courtney Lynch own a company called LeadStar, and basically they create leadership. They work with women all around the world in preparing them for leadership roles to take the C-suite. They have taken their entire platform and put it online for free. So there is a great opportunity called sparkslead.us. Those guys go online and take some professional development classes, especially if you're a recent grad, you're only 1 or 2 years out. It has been extremely helpful, not only to a lot of my mentees, but it's also been helpful to me, where I'll go in and take a module or watch a video, but do some things for yourself, but also take this is a great opportunity to figure out what skills can you add into your portfolio if you've got the time.
Great. Unfortunately, we need to leave it there. We're out of time. I want to thank all of our speakers. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I think it was a really great, had some great questions. Thank you. And we hope everyone learn something. I'll make another quick plug for PLEN. We have our Women in Global Policy seminar is happening online the week of May 18th. So if you haven't been to a PLEN seminar and you're still in school, or if you're a recent grad or changing careers, feel free to check it out at plen.org. And if you have any questions in the meantime, we will be, feel free to reach out to us with questions, and we can share those questions with speakers. But thank you so much for tuning in.